Welcome to today's video where we unpack one of the most stressful money decisions. When you receive a lump sum but have high interest debt and zero savings, should you pay off the debt or build an emergency fund first? In this episode, we'll move step by step through the math, the psychology, and a simple decision framework you can use today. Along the way, we'll add quizzes to test your understanding and diagrams to visualize your plan. By the end, you'll have a clear, practical approach to protect your finances now and accelerate your path to freedom. Here's the agenda. First, we'll define the paradox: paying off debt versus building savings. Next, we'll compare the mathematical case against high-interest debt with the psychological and risk-based case for cash buffers. Then, we'll set clear interest rate thresholds to guide decisions. After that, we'll talk about the idea of a small starter emergency fund. We'll finish with a step-by-step action plan, pitfalls to avoid, and a couple of quick quizzes to make sure you can apply this to your own situation. Before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. This content is for education only and not individualized financial advice. Your personal circumstances, local laws, and options may differ. Consider consulting a licensed financial professional to tailor any plan to your situation. Let's frame the paradox. You've received a lump sum but are carrying high-interest consumer debt and have no emergency savings. If you hold cash, you might be paying 20% interest on a credit card, which is devastating. But if you wipe the debt completely and have no cash buffer, any small emergency could push you right back into new, potentially even more expensive debt. We need a structured way to break this tie. There are two competing goals. First is debt relief, which stops the interest bleed, improves monthly cash flow, and reduces financial stress. Second is an emergency fund, which helps you avoid taking on new debt when life throws small surprises. Ultimately, the goal is long-term stability and freedom. We need both, but the order and allocation matter for speed and safety. Mathematically, the interest rate on your debt is a guaranteed negative return. If your card is at 20%, holding cash while paying that rate is like investing at negative 20%. Therefore, purely on math, you should crush high-interest debt quickly. However, risk management and psychology remind us that if you have zero savings, any small emergency can force you right back into debt, undoing your progress. A balanced approach considers both the interest rate and your risk tolerance. High rates demand fast action on debt, while very low rates may justify building a small buffer first. Let's define practical thresholds. If your debt interest is 20% or higher, aggressively prioritize debt payoff since the cost is overwhelming. If your interest is between 10 and 20%, consider a hybrid. Create a very small buffer to prevent setbacks and then attack the debt. If your rate is under 10%, lead with building a starter emergency fund and then ramp up debt payments. These thresholds are guidelines, not laws, but they anchor your decision-making. This decision tree starts when a lump sum arrives. It immediately branches by interest rate bands: high, moderate, and low. For high rates, the flow directs you to pay debt aggressively while keeping only minimal cash for essentials to avoid catastrophic setbacks. For moderate rates, you are guided to first build a tiny buffer, about 500 units, then allocate the remainder to the debt. For low rates, the tree instructs you to build a starter emergency fund, roughly equal to 1 month of expenses, before accelerating debt payoff. A feedback loop checks for unexpected expenses, pointing you to use the buffer instead of adding new debt, preserving momentum. The end state is stability, with either low or no interest burden and a funded emergency reserve. Here's a practical plan. First, list all your debts with balances, APRs, and minimum payments. Next, categorize each by interest band: over 20%, between 10 and 20, and under 10. If the rate is over 20%, pay it down quickly, while holding only minimal operational cash. If the rate is between 10 and 20%, create a tiny buffer of around 500 units, then push the remainder to debt. If the rate is under 10%, build a starter emergency fund of roughly 1 month's expenses first. Then, accelerate your payoff. Automate transfers, so income flows to your buffer, and then to debt payments, without relying on willpower. Finally, review your progress weekly and adjust as your income and risks change. Quiz time. You have a 24% APR credit card and zero savings. A 2,000-unit lump sum arrives. What is the best first move? Option A, hold all $2,000 in savings for safety. Option B, pay most toward the card and keep only a tiny cash buffer. Option C, split 50-50 between savings and debt. Option D, do nothing until you have a full 3-month emergency fund. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is to pay most toward the card while keeping only a tiny cash buffer. At 24% APR, the interest cost is extremely high, so the mathematical priority is to reduce that balance quickly. However, a small cash cushion helps prevent you from swiping the card again at the first unexpected expense. Let's define the tiny starter fund. Aim for roughly 500 units as a quick buffer. The purpose is not to cover months of expenses, but to keep small surprises from sending you straight back into expensive debt. Keep this money in an account with immediate access, such as a high-yield savings account or checking. If you need to use it, rebuild it as soon as possible. Make that a non-negotiable rule. Here are 3 example scenarios. In a maximum pain case at 26% APR with a 2,000-unit lump sum, you might keep 200 as a minimal buffer and push 1,800 to the debt. In a hybrid case at 15% APR, keep 500 for a starter fund and direct the remaining 1,500 to the debt. In a low-rate case at 7% APR, you might build a 1-month starter fund of 1,500 and put 500 toward the debt. These are examples, not rigid rules. Use them to calibrate your own plan. Let's compare psychology and math. On the psychological side, having a buffer lowers stress, prevents relapse into new debt, and improves long-term consistency because you can stick with the plan. On the mathematical side, avoiding high interest reduces guaranteed costs, speeds up the recovery of your net worth, and optimizes long-term outcomes. The best approach uses both: enough buffer to protect your behavior and aggressive payoff to minimize interest. Beyond allocation, accelerate progress by increasing income and cutting costs. Consider overtime, side gigs, or negotiating compensation to raise inflows. Reduce recurring expenses aggressively to free cash. Automate the flow so a portion goes first to your buffer and then to high APR debt, minimizing decision fatigue. Review monthly and increase your savings rate as your income grows or expenses fall. This timeline charts the path over the first 6 months. At month 0, you list debts and categorize APRs. By month 1, you build either a tiny buffer or a 1-month emergency fund, depending on your rates. Between months 2 and 4, you automate and sustain aggressive payments toward high APR balances. At month 5, you reassess and increase payments with any new income or savings from reduced expenses. By month 6, the goal is a significantly reduced or eliminated high-interest balance and a healthier emergency fund, at which point you gradually shift excess cash to growing the fund further or to long-term investments. Watch out for common pitfalls. First, don't hold large amounts of cash while paying extremely high interest. That is, a guaranteed negative returns. Second, avoid having no buffer at all because a single surprise can send you back into debt. Third, automate your plan rather than relying on willpower. Fourth, don't ignore the income side. Increases in earnings can dramatically speed up your progress. Finally, be careful that windfalls don't disappear into lifestyle creep. Assign every dollar a job before it hits your account. Second quiz. Your credit card APR is 12% and you receive 1,500 units with 0 savings. What is the best first step? Option A, pay all 1,500 to debt immediately. Option B, build about a 500-unit buffer and then pay 1,000 to the debt. Option C, build a full 3 to 6 month emergency fund first. Option D, invest the 1,500 in stocks. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is to build a small buffer of around 500 and then put the remaining 1,000 toward the debt at approximately 12%. The interest is meaningful but not catastrophic, so a hybrid approach balances safety and payoff speed. Here are the key points. Your APR drives the decision. If the rate is 20% or higher, pay down fast and hold only minimal cash. For 10 to 20%, build a tiny buffer first and then attack the debt. For under 10%, build a 1-month starter fund before accelerating payoff. Increase income, reduce expenses, and automate transfers. Finally, if you use your buffer, rebuild it quickly to prevent relapse. To wrap up, use clear interest rate thresholds to choose your path. Blend the mathematics of high-cost debt with the psychology and risk management of having a buffer. Automate your plan, review it on a regular schedule, and iterate until your high-interest balances are gone and your emergency fund is solid. Over time, scale your emergency fund to improve your resilience and reduce stress. Thanks for watching. If this was useful, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a plan, and subscribe for more clear, practical money guidance. In the comments, tell us your plan and whether you lean more toward the math-first approach or the buffer-first approach. We'd love to hear your thoughts and help you refine your strategy.